For 12 years, Cross the Nations have been travelling the globe, carrying a cross and a message of love and hope. They've seen God do the impossible and change the lives of countless people. But now it's time to hear the truth. It's time to hear the story of Cross the Nations.
The nature of the ministry that you do is that you bump into people, you have these amazing encounters, but then chances are you'll probably never see them again. So how does that work in terms of you see someone go through some amazing experience, some amazing encounter with God? Do you ever get to see what happens after? Do you ever get to see how the lives have changed after you've sort of parted ways with them?
We've already mentioned before that the scripture that God gave me right back in the beginning for Across the Nations was Luke chapter 10 verse 1. Jesus chose 70 also and set them 2 by 2 before his face into every place and city where he himself was about to go. And that's the point. We believe that if we will go, he will come. God will come. I remember walking down a country lane near Stourbridge in the Midlands, and as I was walking down this country lane, a car overtook me and pulled in just up ahead of me on a drive, and 2 men got out. One was a Methodist and one was an atheist. Now I know that sounds like a joke, but seriously it's not. And they came over and they asked me, we've been watching you with the cross, and we curiosity got the better of us. We had to come and ask, what on earth are you doing? So I was sharing with them about, Crosswalk and why we do it and the message of Jesus. And it seemed like the atheist was more interested than the Methodist guy. Anyway, while I'm talking to them, I became aware that there was a third guy, there was a third person, and he was standing right behind me, which was a bit unnerving, I don't mind telling you. So as I'm talking to these 2 fellas standing in front of me, there's another guy stood right behind me. And all of a sudden he steps to one side and he starts talking to these 2 guys. He kind of like jumped into the conversation, and he said to the atheist, "How can you be an atheist? Look at this beautiful countryside. Do you not think that had a designer? Do you not think that someone made that? Or do you think it was just a mistake? Just happened?" And anyway, so he carried on. He was being quite aggressive. I wasn't, but he was quite aggressive. And it wasn't long before these 2 fellas jumped in their car and drove off. So I'm left there with this guy, and I'm thinking, who is he? Turns out that it's his drive, and at the end of the drive is his big house, and he'd come down to see what was going on. So I'm left there with him, and I said, "So you must be a Christian then?" And he said, "Well," he said, "about 6 years ago, my best mate invited me to go to church with him. And he said I went along for, just to shut him up really. And he said I went a few weeks and I, listened to what the preacher was saying. And after a few weeks, it seemed to make a bit of sense. And he said on one particular time I was there, the fella at the front, after he'd finished preaching, gave an opportunity for people to come forward to receive Christ. He said, and I found myself getting out of the chair and going forward. He said, and I prayed and I invited Christ into my life. And he said, anyway, so it was great. It was all amazing. He said, but my wife, she hates Christians. She hates God. She hates church. He said, and, I was coming home to ridicule. She was mocking me all the time and having a go at me all the time. She clearly wasn't interested. I couldn't talk to her about anything I was hearing and learning. He said, and this kind of, after a while, he said, it grinded me down. He said, and I eventually just stopped going to church. And he said, and then I sort of stopped praying as well, and gave up and walked away. And I said, oh, that's a real shame. So I said to him, why don't you invite me into your house for a cup of tea? He said, all right then. So we walked up his drive, and as we got closer to his house, he kind of suddenly realised that, wait a minute, my wife hates Christians, and I'm bringing this fella with a massive big wooden cross. He's not just an ordinary Christian. He's a crazy Christian. So he sort of like stopped and thought about it, and then he said, why don't we just go into my caravan? His caravan was just outside his house, and so I said, yeah, sure, no problem, fine, that's great. So we went into his caravan and lent the cross out just round by the side on the fence, and we sat there and I was talking to him and sharing like some of the Crosswalk stories with him, and I shared with him also, you know, the story from the Gospels, the prodigal son. And while I'm sharing that in the most contemporary way I know how, he got a little bit emotional while I was sharing that with him. So I knew God was doing something in his life. And just at that point, you know, the door of the caravan opened, and in walked his wife with 2 cups of tea in her hand. And she came over, and he introduced me. He was really kind of like a bit nervous. Has she seen the cross? Well, it turns out she had seen it. And she brought a cup of tea in for both of us. And she shook my hand. And she didn't go straight away. She sat down, and I was in full flow of sharing these stories. And so I carried on. Sharing some of the miracles that we've seen happen while we walked with the cross. And she listened. And then after about a few minutes, she got up and she left and said goodbye. And so I was left with a fella, and I thought, you know, this is a good opportunity for me to pray with him. So I prayed with him. And God really warmed his heart, you know. And I said goodbye to him, and I walked off down the road with the cross, just praising God, thanking God for a brilliant opportunity to come and nudge someone that had walked with Jesus at some stage and walked away, but his heart's been warmed again. And I really began to pray for him. So it was great opportunity. 24 hours later, and it was actually 24 hours later, I got a phone call the next day, and the voice on the end of the phone said, is that the man with the cross? So I said, yes. He said, what have you done to me? So I thought, what do you mean, what have I done to you? Come on, what have you done to me? You've done something to me. What is it? I was like, I recognised his voice. I knew who it was now, but I was like, what do you mean, done something to you? I haven't done anything to you. He said, since you left here, I've been able to think about nothing else other than Jesus dying for me. So I was like, well, that's brilliant. He said, that's not all. He said, after you went, I sat in the caravan for a little bit longer, and I just pondered over some of the things that you'd said. And I started thinking about God again. And he said, and as I sat there, my wife came back in the caravan. And I was like, now what does she want? And she rebuked me and told me off for not giving you a gift for the road. I was like, wow, that's amazing. He said, hold on, not finished yet. He said, you won't believe, if I was to tell you what's happened in the last 24 hours in my home, he said, you would not believe it. I said, well, come on, tell me. He said, my mate, who took me to church 6 years ago, he said, I rang him up yesterday. He said, and it turns out that he's now a pastor of a church himself. I said, wow, that's brilliant. He said, hold on. He said, and he's on his way around our house because my wife and I have decided to follow Jesus Christ and to live the rest of our lives for him. And I'm like, you're right. I never believed that. Goodness, 24 hours. All of that's happened. He said, yeah. He said, I can't even explain what's been going on in my heart, what's been going on in our lives, in our conversation since you left. So if we will go, he will come.
I mean, as we've already said, we aim just to be in Europe, and our mandate is to go to every nation of Europe. But I had an invitation to go to Mauritius in the church I was in. We had maybe 15, 20 Mauritians in the church, and they said, "You've got to come to Mauritius and walk with the cross." And I said, "Yeah, all right, I'll do it." And I had a great time there. But it was a long way from home, and I was missing home. And at the end, I was really keen to get back. And I can remember when I got to the airport, I was like the first one there to check in. Absolutely person number one. Do you know what I mean? As soon as check-in opened. Anyway, it was all a little bit of a rush because I just wanted to get home. Like, me rushing is going to make the plane go faster, but mentally, I wanted to be home. So anyway, this flight was in because it's so far out. As usual, we always try and travel the cheapest way possible. And I'd flown with Air Seychelles, which was a code share with Etihad, which was a good airline. And so I had to go back. I had to go from Mauritius to the Seychelles Islands, then to Abu Dhabi, and then to London. So it was 3 flights. So I get on the first flight, and it's really nice. And the stupid thing is, right, when we get to the Seychelles, they made us all get off the plane, and then people got back on. And then I got back on the same plane. It's stupid. Why we had to disembark, I don't know, but we did. So anyway, I disembark, and the Seychelles Islands, I mean, it's a beautiful place, but the airport is probably the smallest airport I've flown out of. It's not a very big terminal building. As you can imagine, they probably only get, I don't know, 3 or 4 flights a day or something like that. Not a big airport. So anyway, I walk across the tarmac, I walk in, and I come to where I have to check in. And in the terminal, I can see people queuing up to get on the plane, but I've come kind of from airside, if you like. I've walked in, and I've come in a different door, and there's a girl at a desk with a computer, and she says, "Can I see your boarding pass?" And I had a moment of panic because I suddenly realised I didn't have a boarding pass. I had one to get on from Mauritius to Seychelles, but I should have had 3, one for each leg of the journey. And for whatever reason, it hadn't been done. I don't think it was entirely my fault, but I didn't have a boarding pass. So she was looking a minute, and she said, "Because we've not booked you on for this flight." And I was like thinking, oh my goodness, I'm going to get stranded in the Seychelles Islands. I mean, I imagine there's worse places you could be stranded, but I was keen to get home. So I was like, well, what can you do? And she said, "Just give me a moment." And she took my passport, and she said, "You should be on this flight." And she looked, and she said, "I'm sorry, sir, there's no seats left in economy." And I was thinking, oh no. So she said, "Just give me a moment." She looked, and she said, "It's all right, I found you somewhere. We've upgraded you to business class. And then for the next leg, we've put you in premium economy as well," because I wasn't booked on the London flight either. What had happened, I don't know. So anyway, I got bumped up to business. I was like, yes, come on, thank you, Jesus, come on. Anyway, so I get in the thing, and I'm thinking, complimentary champagne, you know what I mean? Nice proper cooked meal, do you know what I mean? Not with the steerage in the back. I was really excited. Anyway, so I get on the seat, and obviously you get in your seat, and they're much more comfy. And you have got someone next to you, but it's not dead next to you. Do you know what I mean? There's like a bit of a gap in between. So I'm sat on the plane. I get in there, and then a fella gets in the seat next to me, and we take off. And I think I had some juice and some water even before we took off. Do you know what I mean? It was great. Anyway, the guy sat across from me was an Arab. He had the Arab headdress and everything else, and he was clearly, obviously, a Muslim. And he introduced himself, told me his name, and I told him my name. And he was obviously keen just to chat, just to pass a bit of the time. And I thought, well, I don't mind. So I was happy to talk. So he then said to me, "What do you do for a job?" And I said, "Well, this is going to sound unusual to you, but I said, I walk with a 12-foot wooden cross around different nations. I've just come from Mauritius, and I walk around different nations, and I share the message of Jesus Christ with people." And he kind of looked at me funny. Kind of his head was on one side, and he looked at me like strange. And then the next thing that came out of his mouth was like, not that's weird or whatever, but he just said to me, "So what is the message about Jesus?" I thought, mate, this is a really good opportunity now. So I said to him, well, in asking that question, there's quite a lot I could say. And he said, well, this flight's like 3 hours, so let's talk. So we talked, and I kind of went through like about the first 4 sessions of the Alpha course with him. Do you know what I mean? And it was great because he was asking questions, but he wasn't asking questions to like destroy what I'm saying. He was genuinely asking, searching questions, and it was brilliant. And I tell you, that kind of 3 hours just literally flew by. Do you know what I mean? It was gone before. And before I knew it, we were descending into Abu Dhabi, and we were going to part company. And I said to him, look, before you go, I said, can I just give you something to keep? It's got my contact details on if you want to get in touch. And it was one of our tracks. And I'll be honest with you, it was in English, but of course it had been in my rucksack for a fortnight. It wasn't one of our best ones. He's quite keen on us having nice, pristine tracks. This one was a little bit dog-eared. Do you know what I mean? But I gave it to the fella. I said, look, this explains the message. So it's got a prayer on the back as well. And I said, and right at the bottom, it's got my contact details. It's got my phone number and my email. And I gave it to him. We landed, we parted company, we said goodbye, and that was that. So anyway, I remember I had to run to get the next plane because you have to kind of go through security in the airport. It was all a bit of a hassle. But I was literally running to catch the next plane, which I did. And it was an overnight flight by then, flying back to London. So I remember I got home and I said to my wife, Sarah, I told her this whole story. I said it was a brilliant opportunity to share with someone who probably wouldn't ordinarily hear about Jesus. Anyway, I was tired. I had a bit of a kip and what have you. Anyway, that day, because it was like a day later, I got an email in the evening from this man, and he said, thank you for chatting, and it was nice to meet you. He said, I had a really strange experience after I met you on the plane. When he stayed over the night in Abu Dhabi, he stayed in a hotel, and he said, I went to my hotel, I went to bed, and he said, that night, last night, I had a dream. And Jesus appeared to me in a dream and told me that the man on the aeroplane that you met, he's my messenger. And you are to believe that I am the Son of God.
Whoa.
And I was like, what a thing to say. So he said kind of like, is it possible for me to follow Jesus Christ and be a Muslim? How do I do it?
Yeah.
So I instantly replied, just thank you, and I'll stay in touch. And then I spoke to a couple of people who have more experience in this, like working with Muslims. And there was this sense, really, that I can't remember the Bible story. Do you remember the guy, is it Naaman, who comes with the leprosy, and Elijah tells him to wash in the River Jordan 7 times?
Yes.
And he does that, and then the leprosy goes. And then he says, can I take a bit of soil back with me so that when I go back to the thing, when I have to worship my God, the God of my nation, that I'll be thinking of the God of Israel. And there was a sense of that for his benefit, because of the country that he lives in, he couldn't really stop being outwardly a Muslim. It would be dangerous. It would be obvious that he changed, and his life could be at risk. At the very least, he could get arrested, and if he didn't recant, he could possibly lose his life. So it was a very dangerous situation. So I wrote back to him again, and I explained. I said, look, you can follow Jesus Christ, but outwardly it's perfectly all right for you to live as a normal Muslim. Go to the mosque on Friday and what have you, and outwardly live as morally as a Muslim. So he did this. But one of the things he did do, that while he wasn't in the country that he lives in, he downloaded the Bible onto his iPad in Arabic, which was really helpful. So he was able to read the Bible. And so we came to an arrangement that basically while he was in his home country, he wouldn't contact me because it wouldn't be safe to do so. But he did travel a bit. And when he was in other countries, he would get in touch. So I would hear from him periodically, maybe every 3 or 4 months, maybe as long as 9 months gap between. But anyway, it was about a year later, and he messaged me and said, myself and my brother are going to be in Dubai on a certain date. Would you be able to come out and baptize us? Because this is it, I'd forgotten this bit. He'd read that story, I think it's Acts chapter 8, of Philip and the Ethiopian, where Philip had been baptized in water, and he said, yeah, can I be baptized here? The Ethiopian said, here's water, can I be baptized? So he said to me, will you come out and baptize me? And I just said, yes, I'll come. I had no means of getting there, didn't know what to do. And honestly, it was about 3 weeks, a month away. It wasn't a long time frame that I had to kind of organise it. Now, interestingly enough, I'd been at a men's breakfast on the Saturday before, and I'd shared the story up until all those details that I've shared with you now. And one of the elders of the church came to me afterwards, and he says, well, if you get a chance to go out and visit this guy, we'll cover your airfare. So I rang him up. I said, Bob, you're never going to believe it. I said, but I know it was only a couple of days ago I was with you, but this guy's contacted me and asked me if I'll go out and baptize him. And he said, no worries, we'll sort it out. So anyway, a few hours later, he rang me. He said, we know a travel agent in town who will sort it for you. But he said, were you planning on going on your own? And I said, no, ideally I was going to take someone with me just because it's a good idea for two of us to go together. He said, well, I've spoken with the other elders of the church, and we've said we'll pay for your wife to come as well, so both of you can go. So this church paid for Sarah and I to fly to Dubai. So we flew out to Dubai. I'd contacted a pastor of an expat church out there who was going to put us up. And I arranged to meet these fellas, believe it or not, in a Costa Coffee in the mall, the main Dubai mall. So Sarah went off and just had a browse around, and I met with these fellas, and we arranged then to meet the next morning on Jumeirah Beach, which is like one of the main beaches, and baptize him and his brother who'd come to faith in the sea. So we arranged that, and we did that. Then they went off back to their hotel or out for a meal, whatever. And then I met with Sarah, and we went for a meal. Now, Sarah and I were both aware that from time to time that we were being followed. And actually, we were eating in a restaurant, and there were some guys. Sarah asked to move to be nearer to the outside, and then some other people followed us and sat on the table next to us. And then one of the tables got up and walked out in the street or the square, and he was taking photos of us. So we were quite nervous because we're nervous for ourselves, but we didn't want to bring any trouble for anyone else at all, particularly these two fellas, because obviously if they got found out, their lives were at risk. So it was quite a dicey sort of situation. Anyway, the next morning, this pastor took me. We're talking at dawn, first light. We drove down to Jumeirah Beach just as the sun was coming up. And where we'd arranged to meet, there was like all wooden hoardings up and like building going on. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what's going on? And I know it sounds bizarre, but like we're talking this between 5:30 and 6 in the morning. This little Indian guy comes along with a hard hat on, like he's part of the building site. And I just said to him, "Is there any way we can get on the beach?" And he said, yeah. He said, "You need to drive down about another kilometre and you'll be able to get on the beach." So me and this pastor, we were in his car, we drove down, we found it, we pulled up, and immediately I saw, recognised, the guys that I'd been speaking to the night before. So I said, "They're here." So I got out the car, went on the beach. We'd done, if you like, the prep beforehand. I'd explained to them about baptism, and I'd also explained that obviously they're putting their lives at risk by making a declaration of faith like this to be baptized. So they understood that. So anyway, we went in the sea. I baptized the guy that I'd met on the plane, and then both of us baptized his brother. And then we came out and we stood on the sand, and I prayed for them to be filled with the Holy Spirit. So I prayed for the first man that I knew better, prayed for him to be filled with the Holy Spirit. And then we prayed for his brother. And his brother went right over on the sand, out, Sparko. And literally at that moment, while we stood there thinking, "Oh, this is great," I could see a police car coming up like on the promenade, a 4x4, it wasn't a Land Rover, probably a Mitsubishi or something like that, or a Toyota or whatever, a 4x4 with police on the side. And he literally came up, drove along the promenade, turned round and parked, I kid you not, probably 100 foot away, 30 meters away, like really close. And he just sat there. And there's me, two Muslim guys, one's out on the deck looking like he's sunbathing, and we're both stood over him. Now, it seemed like forever, but literally it was probably only a minute, maybe even less than that, maybe even 30 seconds, but it seemed like eternity. And eventually this guy kind of came round, and the two of them were speaking in Arabic, so I didn't know what they were saying. But basically, he told me afterwards, he was saying to me, "What happened? What did he do to you?" Do you know what I mean? And the guy that had gone over basically said, "I just felt such a sense of love and peace." He said, "Before I knew it, it kind of swept me on my feet, and I just went with it. I was enjoying it so much that I just stayed there." And it's just a wonderful feeling of being loved and having this peace in my heart. So anyway, we sorted ourselves out, dried off, what have you, and then we went back to their hotel, and I did some studies with them for a couple of hours, and also gave them some materials that I've been given, like on little, the little sticks you put in your computer. I can't remember what they're called. I've got a blank. Little hard drive things that you put into your computer. And I'd been given some stuff in Arabic for them by people who work with Muslims. So it was discipleship material and stuff like that. So anyway, we did that. They flew back then to their country. I nearly said the place. I'm not going to say the place. They flew back to their country. Sarah and I stayed another day, spent some time went to the church on the Friday, because the churches meet on the Friday there, and then flew home on the Saturday. Now, the amazing thing is this guy and his brother, I mean, this happened a few years ago now, they have set up what I would call an underground church in their country.
Wow.
So in the city where they live, they've got about 5 or 6 small groups of like 12, 15 people in each group that meet together. They worship God, they study the Bible, they pray. It's not like churches we know it. The women meet in one group, the men meet in another group. Culturally, it's very different. But they've gathered in these small groups, maybe about 80, 90 people over the remaining few years after that. And they've got an indigenous church in their nation. Now, I mean, at this point in time, if I hear from this guy once a year, that's about it. It's not a lot. I don't have a lot of contact with him, but they're still going strong, and they've established a underground church in their own nation, and they're leading people to Christ. They're being very, very careful, but in their family groups and in their extended family, God is reaching out and reaching a nation that wouldn't have otherwise heard the gospel at all. So really, really exciting. So God does do stuff. If we go, He will come.
What an amazing story! I don't think I think I'd heard bits of that story before, but not to the extent you just shared it. And honestly, it's bowled me over, to be honest. I mean, just to reiterate as well that this guy's life is literally on the line.
Oh yeah, without doubt.
And some people, they might. I don't know if it'll offend people that he's still sort of practicing an outward Muslim lifestyle, but his heart when he's praying those prayers is not towards any other god but Jesus Christ. And this guy's laying down his life to see people saved. Setting up any, even talking to anyone about Jesus is illegal. I'm guessing, right, where he's from. So,
yeah, I mean,
the fact that he's bringing other people he's seeing other people come to faith is a big deal.
Yeah. One of the things they do is they're very careful what they say in front of their children, because it's often that the children can accidentally give away the whole family by saying something at school or something like that gives away that their family are Christians, and they get in trouble. So they have to be super, super careful about what they say in front of the children.
Yeah.
Which must be really hard.
Yeah, it's no joke, and I was just saying that this guy's literally laying down his life, and it's like some people might be watching this thinking, what is it that causes two men to carry a cross around the world, to start at one end of a country and walk through to another? What is it that convinces two men to do that, and what is it that would convince a man who's spent his life being a Muslim to change in a very short period of time and now dedicate his life to something that might see him get killed for it? And it's Jesus. That's the power of an encounter with Jesus Christ. When you know him and know what he's done for you and know what he sacrificed for you, then the only response that seems right to give, that you want to give, is I want to give everything for you. I want to lay down everything for you because you did it for me. And that's the point in it. What you do, that is the point. You want people to know what Jesus did. And we weren't ever promised an easy life as Christians. We weren't promised that it was going to be sunshine and rainbows, but because we know what he did, we can do what we need to do.
Amen. Amen.
Really hope you've enjoyed this episode of Across the Nations. I hope that it's inspiring you and showing you that with God anything is possible. If you've ever met Mike and Alan along the way and you've got a story, we'd love to hear it. So please get in touch at hello@crossthenations.com. Thanks for watching.